is not going to send a representative today. So why? Because, pardon? No, it's not. We only invited them one other time, and they did show up. Please don't talk without having a mic, though, because we do record this and it doesn't go on the system, and then no one can hear what you're saying. So if you want to make a comment, raise your hand and we'll go ahead. And so we have a comment up there.
Well, first of all, good morning, Lynn.
Good morning.
I am so sorry you're going to have to go through this, and I pray God gives you the patience for it. But I bet you there's some mad people, including myself right now. Do you have at least the information from them?
I have the general information that we talked about last time. Again, anybody that's gotten it, you should expect to get a letter before the end of the year. If you haven't gotten a letter, the contact information is on there. And they said that anyone who has specific questions about their specific business should give them a call. So who they're reaching out.
It's like trying to get through to, to the city council.
You don't need to call the city council, call business licensing.
I'm saying trying to get them to answer the phone is a whole nother ballgame.
They also said if you give me your card, I will hand carry it over to them and have them call you.
I'll make sure that happens. Thank you for your time.
So I'll do that and make sure that they follow up with you if you have specific questions about your specific business. And I apologize. I wish that if they'd given us a day's notice, we would have probably sent out an email and said, that they wouldn't be here, and we're happy to talk to you about anything, but they're the experts.
Am I understanding correctly that this applies to ceremonies that take place within the city limits and not in unincorporated Clark County?
So the letter is coming from, and this is a little loud, Skip, I think. The letter is coming from the city of Las Vegas. So it would be for people that are conducting business within the city of Las Vegas jurisdiction. That's most chapels. And so outside of those, if you go to Boulder City, they have different licensing laws. Henderson has told us that you don't need to have a license unless you live in Henderson, and that's where your home is. And this is a home-based business, so then you would want a Henderson business license. But if you're just conducting ceremonies in Henderson, they do not require a business license. From my understanding of what happened a few years ago, there was a number of issues, and actually the chapels came to City of Las Vegas business licensing and asked for these ordinances, and I think that's where it came from.
Could you just,
that's why it's the city
for those of us who've just become aware of this, could you give us just a brief overview of why we're here and what the issue is?
So I'm the Clark County Clerk, and I issue your Officiant's license, which is basically a certification that you have the ability to perform marriages in Clark County, or actually throughout the state. So if you are doing that as a business, then City of Las Vegas is requesting that you contact them and find out whether you need a City of Las Vegas business license. A number of letters have already gone out. And so that's why people were contacting me to find out why the letters had gone out and what they meant. So as far as I understand from what the city has said, it doesn't matter whether it's a tip, a gratuity, a fee. If you're collecting money on a commercial basis, just like the chapels are commercial chapels, they're businesses, so they have business licenses, then the officiants would probably need to have an officiant's license as well, which a business license, as well. So if you are running if you're doing this as a business, if you're advertising, if you're marketing, then that would indicate that you're trying to make income from it. Now, you would also need a state business license. And if you make 66.66% of the annual wage, you can apply for an exemption. If you're a home-based business that makes 66.66% of the annual wage, you can apply for an exemption from the state. But you still want to go through that so that you show that you did the proper legal things.
Lynn.
Other questions?
Lynn, are you familiar with that? A part of the in the application for the application of an officiant,
Okay.
which was issued by the Secretary of State. If I recall it correctly, it says that the any minister can perform weddings in Clark County or in the state of Nevada as an incidental. Incidental. I know it's not happening now
Yeah, I'm
because
not-
it has become a business. It was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and it says there, incidental. And similar to the question of this gentleman here about if you are performing weddings in the county, therefore
In the
you don't have
unincorporated county, you mean?
you don't have to have a license. Only if you are doing it in the city part, correct? It doesn't make any relevance though. I mean, you are already licensed by the state. Why? That's my opinion.
Right. Well, all I know is, and I am not a business licensing expert, so I'm giving you the information I have, but, I wouldn't bet my life, my house on it or something. But when I was a freelance writer, before I was the county clerk, I had a state business license, and then I had to have a business license in Boulder City because I was a writer and I was a home-based business based in Boulder City. So I think you need the state license, and then whatever jurisdiction you're working within, you have to have a license there, which would be either where your home is based, or if you're conducting business in those different areas, you might need to have a business license based on where you're conducting business.
Thank you.
And I truly apologize that I didn't, that we didn't have a chance to
My
tell
question
you
is,
guys.
if your address is not in Las Vegas, so you will not be getting a letter from the Las Vegas?
No, I think that's two different things. So if you're conducting business in the city of Las Vegas, you'll probably get a letter. And even if you're not, you may get a letter and you just call and say, well, I'm not doing any business in the city.
Okay, but my address is in North Las Vegas, all right, and if I happen to perform a wedding in Las Vegas or Winnemucca or someplace like that, I'm going to get a letter from Las Vegas?
Probably, yes. And again, you can contact them directly. There's a number at the bottom of the letter. Contact them directly and walk them through your business, and they'll probably tell you what you need for the city of Las Vegas. And as far as I know, only the city has sent out letters, although I have heard from a couple people that like the Valley of Fire and Red Rock are sending letters saying that you do need to make sure you're pulling permits if you're doing business, and the city of Las Vegas, if you're doing your wedding in a park or the Red Rock, that you need to pull a permit. So I think I've heard that those letters are going out too. I haven't seen any of those yet, though. Has anyone gotten one of those? Not yet?
If you're doing it through a church and you do not charge, if you're doing it through a church and you do not charge, then you aren't required to get a business license. Is that correct?
Correct. You'd only need a business license if you were doing business as an officiant.
But if a pastor in the church is advertising on the internet and making a charge, then those are the two qualifications. Is that correct?
Pretty much, just from and that you're doing business within the city of Las Vegas.
And you said Henderson has their own.
Each municipality has its own authority, and from what I understand, Clark County and Incorporated Clark County is not requiring a license. That Henderson is requiring a license if your home is in Henderson, and that's where your base of your business is. I think that's what's true in Boulder City. I haven't gotten a clear answer from North Las Vegas. I think it might be a little different. And then if the city is who's sending out those letters. So the city is the one that's really saying that you have to have a license. And I understand, business license, and I understand that that was based on, something that happened 10 or 15 years ago with the chapels in the city to try to get some things, better control.
And the other point you made was if your income is 66.66%.
If you're home-based, this is my understanding, and I would call the Secretary of State's office, but my understanding is reading the exemptions. So if you're a nonprofit, those kinds of things, but also if you're a home-based business whose income is 66.66% of the annual wage or less, then you can apply for an exemption. So that would be, when I looked, if you do a web search of the annual wage in Nevada, when I did the calculation, it was a little less than $20,000 a year. So probably most people don't make $20,000 a year as an officiant. So then you would get the state waiver, but that wouldn't have anything to do with the city.
My question is, you're talking about in the state. What if you go and do weddings in another state and you have, I called them, I've done them in Illinois because I did for my grandchildren and one of my cousins and that, and I just told them that I had the license from Clark County. I didn't have to show them anything. I also have the ministerial one in that, and so does that affect anything?
So each state has their own laws on who can marry people. Some of them have very liberal laws. Nevada, I think probably because we're the wedding capital of the world and it is an industry here, has more restrictive laws. According to state law, NRS 122, if you guys read it, that's the wedding marriage officiant statutes. You have to, no matter if you're, ordained or have a master's in ministry, or if you're ordained through your church, you have to then go through the county clerk from where you live and get permission to perform marriages from the county clerk. That allows you to marry anybody in Nevada. If you go outside the borders of Nevada, your officiant's license here doesn't have any bearing.
It would
So
be the
you'll have to find out.
ministerial license then that they,
You would have to look at that state and find out what their laws are.
but like I said, I called them and there was just sign your name and you don't fill out any forms or anything.
And that could be true. There's that, like I said, I know that in South Carolina you have to give 2 weeks of marital counseling before they can get married. So every state has their own laws. So you need to know the laws of the state that you're in. A lot of people come here and think that because they can marry people in Illinois, that they can marry people here. That's not true. They're not a licensed officiant in Nevada unless they go through the county clerk. And you can marry anybody in Nevada within the borders of Nevada, no matter which county you're registered with. If you move out of the county, then you lose your permission to perform marriages because it's county-based. And just as an aside, real quick, make sure that you guys keep us up to date on how to get a hold of you. Make sure your information's up to date so that that we can contact you. Last time we did a mailing, we got 1,200 letters back from officiants that we couldn't find. So make sure that you're not one of those. So you say, oh, you never called me or you never emailed me. If we have your information, we will do that. If we don't, we can't. So please, there's forms out there. Make sure all your friends and family officiants know that they need to keep us up to date to their physical address and hopefully their email address. That helps us a lot as well.
My other question is, when I came down and applied for my license and that, no one said anything about having a business license or talked to me about it. And I've done some weddings like for Caesars for free when they had that 12, 13, 14 on the wheel, and a few at Planet Hollywood in that, but when did this business license, did this just get brought up again, or is it something that's always existed and I just didn't know about it and I've actually been breaking the law?
This is not a new law. I think, do you know when all those ordinances passed, Charlotte? It was 10 or 15 years ago from what I understand. So yeah, you probably have been going outside of the law if you've been doing weddings in the city of Las Vegas boundaries. But Planet Hollywood and where else did you say? Caesars, they're county, so you're probably doing okay. As long as you're not making money at it, that it also doesn't matter. So it's if you're doing this as a business, if you're trying to make money at it. And it
So
doesn't,
what does a business license cost?
I think it depends on what you're doing. I think it's 150, you know what is it?
The initial fee is $50, then they're gonna get
Just a second, could you get the mic?
I believe that the setup fee is $50. then they're getting $250 a year for having a Las Vegas business license. But then I also found out that if you have to go through a state licensing, which they will exempt, like you said, but you still have to pay them $200 too.
If you're exempt? I thought that was
No,
the
no,
actual
no,
fee.
no, it's not, not state license. I mean, not the state. There's another, it comes out, it's gonna come out to $400, but basically.
Here.
No, $250 a year for the city. That's the only one. Everybody else, once you're established, once you're taxation, it's
Oh,
the taxation, that's right, I'm
correct.
sorry. Once you go through them, that's $200, and once it's all set up, you're just gonna be paying the city $250 a year.
Okay, and then making sure you're paying the taxes, whatever are appropriate. I think they only charge taxes on, when I was a writer, like my paper and computers and all those things, you would pay the sales tax on it. But that was the only tax. Shoot, made me think of something I just forgot. Oh, I think there's also, it depends on what you're doing. If you're just doing officiating, that's professional services. If you start coordinating, bringing in the flowers and the food and the location and getting a permit for Red Rock and all those kind of things, then you're actually a business, what is it? It's like a wedding coordinator, but that's under another name. I'm sorry, I wasn't prepared to talk about businesses today because I thought they would be here. But a wedding, they're under something else, but it's like a planning service. And so that's a different license if you're starting to do those kinds of things on your website. If you pull all those in, I think if you aren't making any cut from that, that's one thing. But if you start, I do a photographer and I get a finding fee or whatever, then you need a different license. And again, you'd want to talk to the business licensing and tell them what exactly you're doing so you know the right license to apply for.
Hi, if I'm correct,
Just one second. I'll get you the mic.
just renewal of vows. What about
Renewal of vows, it doesn't really matter if you're doing vow renewal or something else. If you're making money at it, then that would be part of the business licensing fee. So if you're making money counseling, I assume anything you're doing, making money as a officiant, you would probably need a business license for. So it doesn't really matter what you do.
So according to what you're saying right now then, so the Catholic Church, when a priest performs a wedding ceremony, you're saying he's okay because it's a donation, or?
No, it really doesn't matter whether it's what you
So
call
he needs
the
to
money.
have a business license, the priest does?
It depends on if he's doing it to make money.
But if you go to the church, they will tell you that you have to pay between $300 and $500 donation to the priest. How is that any different than what's happening on the outside? How
Just
do
as
they
a-
get a pass, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, just as a church has different legal requirements than a chapel, because a chapel is a business enterprise and a
However,
church is
if
not.
I'm freely practicing my religion, and that is part of my religion and how I practice my religion, isn't that an infringement of my constitutional rights?
No, you can do whatever you would like as a religion. What they're asking is that if you're doing this for money, then you need a business license.
And wouldn't that be somehow like the government coming in and censoring how I run my business or what I'm doing with my business?
No business is protected from what I understand. A church or nonprofit is. So
So a priest is okay to charge $300 to $500, and he can do
he's
that, but
doing-
he
if
doesn't
he's
need a
doing it through
license.
the
Okay,
church.
thank you.
If he's doing it through the church, it's totally different legally than if you're doing it as a business. They're just two different things. The state does not regulate churches, and from what I understand, most priests are employees of their church. So if you are working for a chapel as a W-2, you also would not need a business license. It's only if you're an independent contractor.
Say that again, the last part.
If you're working for a chapel, so if the chapel gives you a W-2 each year, you would also not need a business license because you're an employee and you are under the auspices of the business license of the church. So anybody, of the chapel, I'm sorry. So,
We get a 1099 from the chapels, so,
that's an independent contractor, just like a photographer.
Right,
It's a
but we're-
1099.
okay. So an independent contractor has to get a business license.
Correct. An independent contractor is a business. I'm sure you need to file taxes, federal taxes, and that would be under as a business, 1099.
Do you think that you might lose a lot of ministers, or is that what you're trying to do? I mean, to clean up maybe, or?
No, I'm not trying to do
Because
that.
I know a lot of people are really frustrated, Lynn. I'm just being honest and speaking to you from the heart.
Yeah.
A lot of people are really frustrated because we understand that, this apparently, word out there is that cities in the red and somebody need to go out and try to make funds. And it's just kind of the way that it came about, in all honesty, is really, really difficult to take. And again, if I'm practicing my religion and that's how I do it because I counsel my people and that sort of thing, I don't understand how that's different than what a priest is doing, because performing a ceremony is a religious act. And it is an infringement. I mean, it really is.
A priest that's working on behalf of his church would be under the auspices of the church. So if you have a church that you are doing this for, and they're the ones that are giving you a W-2,
But according to
would
that
be-
logic, it really just doesn't make sense, because they do literally tell someone you must pay between $300 and $500 to the priest. So
Well,
that
the
to me
Catholic Church
says,
is one of the most wealthiest entities in the world. Churches make money. No one says churches don't make money, but they do it under a nonprofit status that says that they're a church, and so they have special laws. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
then who regulates who the special churches are?
The IRS or the state.
Okay.
So they designate that you're a church.
Okay.
So if and I know there's some small churches around there that are only a few people. That's fine too, I'm sure. So if you can show that you're getting a W-2 from your church, and we had some special focus groups that you guys are welcome to sign up for additional ones, and there are some officiants that are within a small church, and the church gives them a W-2, and the money goes directly to the church, not to you. That would be, I'm assuming, a different way than if you're getting money directly and you get a 1099. So a W-2 would mean, obviously, that you don't need a business license because you're an employee.
Lynn, there will be
Wait, get a mic.
I think I can project my voice.
I know, but it's not. It's being recorded, and so they can't hear you on that tape. So just wait a second. And I think we had another question. And
Lynn, let me change subjects for just a second. The last meeting I came to here that you were so gracious to host, you really kind of shook everybody when you said there's a possibility that we're going to have to renew our Officiant license every 5 years or so, and you didn't know for sure. Do you know for sure?
I pretty much do. Yeah, that law went through. It's enabling legislation, which is what they call it, enabling legislation, and that means that each county can decide. I have been talking about this for the last year. I got the consensus of people that had been coming to these meetings that they thought that was a good idea, because one thing is, like last time we did a mailing, we have over 4,700 officiants registered in Clark County. I know that there's not 4,700 people actually performing marriages. So then the clerk's office in each county is required to submit that database to the Secretary of State's site. So right now, when we did the last mailing, we got over 1,200 returned mails of people that I can't find. I've been told that some of those people are no longer alive. So that database is basically useless. And so what we had talked about is doing a 5-year renewal that would start 5 years after this date, which would be July probably, if we decide to do that. And that way we would, over time, clean up the database so that when someone was actually looking for an officiant, either a chapel or a couple, they could find real people instead of people that are deadwood, or no longer here in Nevada, or they literally died, or, so what we're trying to do is get a database that's actually functional and helpful to those of you that do want to get,
Will you
copies.
send out a renewal notice so that we know when it's that 5 years?
Absolutely. And because it's enabling, we can kind of make sure that everybody understands what's happening before, so it's not a shock to anyone.
And the last question is, everybody's mind, is there a fee?
Yeah,
will
it
there
would
be a fee to
the
renew?
$25, yeah,
The $25,
yeah.
and you're not going to raise that?
I would have to go to the legislature to raise it, so that would mean it'd be at least next time, which I have no desire to raise it, frankly.
Good.
There's no real motive to raise it.
All right. Well, I'm leaving. I got everything, and thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, a couple comments. One to you directly, Lynn. Thank you for the beautiful way you're handling these questions and comments. You're doing it with cool and class, and thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Second comment is to all of us, she is not the bad guy here. She's not the city of Las Vegas that's requiring the business licenses. So please cut some slack on this issue, to her on this issue. The third thing is, when our church went under a change of name, and we submitted that to you, and I made the assumption that that would go to the state as well. But the state is still has me registered under the former name.
Let's talk offline. I think you would have, the church would have to re-register, I assume, with the state.
Okay.
And then your license would have to be, I'm not sure, we'd have to figure out how to handle it.
It's the same organization, they just did a name change.
Okay.
And
Because your license is, and this isn't, your license is attached to your church. So if the church really reorganizes, then they would have to reissue, we'd have to go through the whole process again. But if it's the same church with a different name, we'll figure it out. But that's pretty unique, I think, so.
Just a couple of points that have already been brought up. We know it's the city of Las Vegas that's requiring the license. So again, just so effectively, anything along the Strip corridor south of Sahara is in the county, so that would not apply.
Correct.
Okay, I just
You
wanna
would
be
need to make
certain.
sure you know. But mostly it's most of the chapels, from what I understand, are
Okay.
in the city of Las Vegas. Most of the Strip properties are in the county. So yeah, you'd need to know.
That's correct. You're correct. Then just to note too, I went on the City of Las Vegas website. It's been a few weeks, but to even begin the process, you do need a Nevada State tax ID number. You need a Nevada Secretary of State business ID number.
Right.
I mean, so there are a number of items that need to be procured before you can even
Correct.
begin the process. And I also I downloaded the portal process through the city. And if you have a fictitious firm name,
You do need a
you would need to
fictitious
then
firm
get-
name as well.
you
if
would
you're
need to
doing,
get that before
correct.
you
So
begin the
if
process.
I was doing Lynn Goya,
Okay.
Officiant, I don't need a fictitious firm name, but I know some of them, you have, the best wedding ever, that would be a fictitious firm name, and as a business, you would need to register that, correct? And the very first thing, everybody needs a state license. But I think home-based businesses look like they have that exemption if they make, and the number is 20,000-ish, but that, again, would be through the Secretary of State's office that you would confirm that. But everybody doing business needs a Secretary of State's business license.
Okay, thank you.
I'm asking a personally directed question about the mailing list. I haven't received a mailing from the office in over 2 years, and I know my address hasn't changed because I've lived in the same house for over 20 years. So should I still just be updating with you to make sure that I haven't been deleted from the list?
Just check. Paula can take your information down and make sure that it's up to date. And then we have, out there, we have a bunch of these. So if you haven't received things, you're only here because friends told you to come, you're probably not on our list. So just fill one of these out just in case.
Okay.
And that would make sure that we're up to date.
Speaking to the issue about the priests, those priests still technically need a business license if they're receiving that money individually. So
Correct.
they're not you're not being discriminated against because they're affiliated with a large church. It's a situation of everybody that receives their funds directly from, whether it's a bride and groom or an individual they're counseling, they all need to have a license. It's just that in a lot of cases, the church is receiving the funds for them and then redirecting the funds.
Correct. Oh, you need a mic.
How does this affect, because once it's business licensing, does this have effect in terms of same-sex marriages? Because does the business license open us up to another possible liability in terms of if you don't do same-sex marriages? What liability does that open us up to?
Let me make this clear. Only through the church do you have the ability legally to not conduct a same-sex marriage. Mm-hmm. So if private businesses, chapels, do not have that right to discriminate because they're a business. So if you are doing a wedding within the church to the congregation within the church, then you have, again, different legal responsibilities. Anything that's not directly connected with that church or their congregation, especially if you're taking money for it, you are required to conduct same-gender marriages. That's the law.
So that becomes
That's federal law.
That becomes a requirement on those individuals.
Every single officiant out there.
Once you have a license and it's in the public.
Whether or not you have a license, if the only exception is if you're conducting marriages within that church, within their congregation. So say we wanted to get married from our pastor, but we wanted to do it at my house. That's within the congregation, right? Mm-hmm. Just because it's not on the church property. But if we wanted to get married at a chapel and you were with the church, but you married us at a chapel, you are required to perform that marriage as an officiant. You don't have an exemption. So whether or not you have a business license, you do not have an exemption unless you're within, the confines of the church, whether it's physically or just within the congregation. So let me make that really clear. If I hear that you are denying same-sex, same-gender couples, if someone contacts me, that is grounds to revoke your officiant's license. So, it's pretty clear because it's federal.
Good morning. My question is, I have a counseling and therapy agency that's licensed already in the state of Nevada. As an officiant, will I need another license on top of that license to conduct marriages in my facility or anywhere that couple may choose?
I would think you need to ask business license. I would assume as long as it's within that domain of your current business, I would assume that's okay. But again, that's above my level of knowledge. But I don't know that you need multiple business licenses unless your license is just this, and then you're doing something out here. And, I wouldn't be able to answer that. I'm sorry.
My question is, I have a couple questions.
Okay.
First of all, if we have a license from you.
You don't have a license from me.
I mean a license from here.
You have a certificate of permission to perform marriages.
Okay.
So it's a certificate.
It's a
not
certificate.
license.
All right. If you like work in the county, like I told you I did a few at Planet Hollywood, they sell their whole package and the person writes them a check to that and you are given cash and you never get a 1099 or anything from them. I don't know how legal that is or not, but I haven't done any for a while. But my other question is this, is that you do not need a business license if you are not taking money.
Correct.
So just to have the certificate is enough to perform the wedding
Absolutely.
ceremony. Okay, and then when we need to renew those certificates, you will be notifying us.
Correct.
So it's only if you're for profit.
Correct.
And if somebody gives you a tip, that has to be declared, though. That's where you get in trouble, right?
Correct. You can't, just because you label it something different, doesn't really,
Now, when
to
we
business.
turn our licenses, not our licenses, when we turn in our papers after the weddings,
correct.
and that, is that where you check to make sure with the Better Business Bureau? Or, and that, not with the Better Business Bureau, but with the
Business licensing?
business license,
No, we
that-
don't check.
you don't
We don't check.
check back and forth? This is just like an on your honor program.
Well, business licensing has a lot of legal things they can do. We wouldn't be, the clerk's office wouldn't be doing anything. But business licensing has a lot of, and the state have a lot of legal things. And if you're getting income and not declaring it, I'm sure the federal, they're not real happy either. So, but the clerk's office is, that's not our domain. So no, we have no intention of checking.
Okay.
It's not like we wouldn't accept the certificate either way. We would still, that's your business. You have to conduct your business in a way that, you deem appropriate.
Well, like in the instance I gave you where there's a contract signed and then you're given the money, but you never receive a 1099, that's somebody's business besides mine if I wasn't told beforehand that that was required.
I would assume that if you are getting money, that you would want to make sure that you are getting it in a way that doesn't jeopardize
Well,
your own.
my feeling is if the gentleman says it costs you $400 or so a year and I'm maybe doing 2 or 3, it's not worth it for me to have a license. It would be better for me just to donate and say, I'll do the wedding for you. Okay,
That's
thank you.
perfectly
You gave me a good
acceptable, yes.
understanding.
Yeah.
Over here.
Oh.
I have a general question, and I've been an ordained minister and been doing various.
Closer.
I've been an ordained minister and done officiating weddings for the last 20 years. But with the latest update of everybody's licensing that went through the Secretary of State's office, within the last 6 weeks, I have been receiving emails, strange emails from, one was, because I'm Native American, so a wannabe Indian from Montana wanted to know if she could do marriages under my umbrella. So, I get that a lot. But a couple weeks ago, I got something from dying man in Turkey who wanted to give the church $1 million and so because of my work with the Lord. So I turned that in to the FCC and the people that handle those complaints. But I got one yesterday that disturbed me, and it's from a gentleman by the name of Pastor Randy Conley from the Christian Marriage Council. And his got to be pretty embarrassing. He was wanting to help me as a minister in my counseling, show married couples pornographic films, basically. So I was just wondering if any of you have been getting new emails based on Dear Reverend so-and-so or whatever, because like I said, this is the first time in 20 years it's ever happened. And I realize that our statuses are at the Secretary of State's office and anybody can see it and the address and how to reach us. But I was very curious about that.
So has anyone else gotten spam or weird emails?
I did a few years ago. It hasn't happened lately, but years ago.
So what we do is the clerk's office wouldn't give out your email except for those that want to put an email so that people can contact them, right? And on the Secretary of State sites, we would ask you if you want to put your phone number and your email on so that people can contact you. But if we do that, then it's basically public information. So anybody can call that and either have something that's fairly specific, so you don't get a lot of spam, but once it's on the Secretary of State's site especially, it is public records. So just be aware of that and maybe have a separate phone number or a separate email. I don't know any way to protect you guys from that, because either you don't give your information out and then nobody can contact you, or you do and everybody can contact you. No one else has really had that though, so maybe they were targeting you for some reason, I don't know. But I think you can report that to some places if you think it's spam.
Oh, I did.
Okay.
Just a question with respect to timeline. We're May 24th now. Has the city set any, 60 days, 90 days, January of 18, when all of this needs to be within the system? So how much time do we have to work through this process?
I have not asked that question. I have not heard. I know that they were, I think they were planning on sending out about 100 letters a week and planning on getting that done by the end of the year. And so I would assume that they wouldn't start enforcing it until they had everybody notified. And again, I think that they're not positive who all is doing business within the city. So, they're going to contact everybody. And if you don't, then just, say, I don't do business within the city. Right there.
Ms. Goya, thank
Oh.
you. Hang in there.
Thank you, Bishop.
Let me throw some verbiage out corrected for a summation on the 501c3. If one of my ministers is performing a marriage at the church or for the church, and they're getting paid, are they required to get a business license because I'm giving them a 1099? Or is that 66 below the threshold? How is that dealt with? And thank you.
Yeah, and remember there's two different, so the Secretary of State has that threshold, that exemption. So that's state, and then the city is a different beast. So those are two different entities that you have to address. They're really independent. So don't think because you did one, you don't have to do the other. You have to do both if you're doing within the city, which everybody has to do. Secretary of State. Any business within the state has to file with the Secretary of State. And that's where that exemption for home-based businesses is. So if I'm not I can guess, but I don't know that I even should, because I'm not really sure on something like that. I would assume if you're doing a 1099, then they might need a license, but I really don't know. I really wouldn't know how to answer that accurately.
Then that's fine. Only interjection is that some of them only do one or two, and then I was balancing the 200 against it. You know where I was headed. Thank you. Yeah, and you have to decide whether it's really, if you do one or two weddings a year, maybe it's not worth getting $100 for 2 weddings a year and going through all this hassle. Instead, no one's saying you cannot perform marriages. They're saying that if you do it as a business, you need a business license. But if you don't do it as a business, you could do whatever you want if it's not a business and you're not making money at it. So just, you don't have to have a business license to perform marriages. You have to have a certificate of permission to perform marriages from the clerk's office. And then if you decide to make a business of it, then you would need a business license. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Lynn. Two-part question. I hope I can remember both parts. Getting older, so it's going to be a trial. I believe, because of my sponsorship through church in applying for my officiant's certificate, and also through an outside ministry being allowed to reconfirm that certificate, that if performing a wedding through the church in the capacity of an officiant, the church may receive a fee.
Correct.
None of my business. That's
correct.
Because they are hosting and allowing this marriage within the church to be conducted, and then having me be the officiant for that ceremony. I may receive a stipend, a blessing from the wedding couple, and in discussion with them about what their desires are for the ceremony, they ask, what do you charge? And I don't answer that because I'm working on behalf of the church. In the process, subsequent to the ceremony, if I receive a blessing, that's a tip. It's not paid through the church, not paid to the church to be forwarded to me. It's an outside gift for performing their ceremony. Rightfully, I should report it as a tip,
Well, I think that, I mean,
but I'm not charging them.
if you're receiving money, the city doesn't care which way you're doing it. But if you're going through the church, that, you know, how many weddings a year do you do that way? And you don't have to answer me, but, you know, if you're doing this as a church officiant for the church, and you're not really making a business of it, that's one thing. But if you start doing a bunch of marriages outside of that capacity, then you would probably need a business license for that. And then I'm not sure, if you're not paid by the church, how that would, if you're already doing business in other locations as a business, and then you're also receiving some money from the church, you would have to ask somebody that, again, knows a little bit more than me. But if it's only, you know, if it's only a little bit of money 1 or 2 times a year, nobody's going to probably go after you. Although technically, if you're making money, you know, you should have a business license.
Understood. And I believe a 1099 is appropriate when you make receive income at a particular amount. I believe. Yeah, there's.
No, because again, as a freelance writer, sometimes, you know, I would do multiple businesses like a lot of you guys do, and I might get, you know, $375 1099 from one of them, you know, just very low.
Very low, yeah.
Yeah, so it kind of doesn't matter. Just to protect yourself, if you're doing business, you know, if you're making money and you get a 1099, you would want to explore whether you need a business license, in my opinion, to protect yourself.
Yeah, and my last question is, or maybe it's a comment. I have known associates who have performed weddings outside of the state of Nevada at the request of the couple who are residents of Nevada, but they want to be married in an out-of-state location. Pay the expenses of my friend, and he performed it. And the feedback I got from that process when I asked him, I said, how were you able to do that? He said, I got an exemption from Nevada, a 1-day exemption to perform out of state.
I have not heard about that. We do have a reciprocity for, you know, someone that works, you know, a minister that works for another church, and say the Nevada church guy is leaving for 2 weeks, then you can get the other person to come in and as their church leader, right? From out of state. They still need to apply through the clerk's office so that we knew about them, and that would still be the $25, but that would be like an exception on residency. Right now, you need to live here or do the 1 day, you know, one performance. So say somebody from Colorado, their children were getting married here, they wanted to apply through the church, do the 1 time, that's okay. But if they wanted to get an officiant's license, it's not okay. You have to be a resident of the county that you're applying through.
But it doesn't work the opposite way, where if someone asked me to marry them in San Bernardino.
You need to know California laws, and I don't know them well enough. So yeah, the laws are state-based, so you need to know the laws of the state. I know somebody that went down to Mexico. I don't know if that was a legal wedding or not. If a Mexican person came up here, Mexican minister came up here and just performed a marriage, that's not following our state laws.
Right.
So you need to know the laws of where the people are standing when you're conducting the ceremony.
Thank
So-
you.
So, yeah, the marriages are, there's reciprocity again. If you get married in Nevada, it counts in every state. If you get married in Nevada, it counts in every country, and vice versa. So you do need to know the laws of where you are marrying that person, because it's those laws that actually are guiding you.
My husband and I own another business outside of the wedding industry, and I just kind of wanted to address the whole 1099 concern. We have quite a few 1099 contractors that work for us. For our own protection, we require that they submit a copy of their business license to us to make sure that they're licensed to work for us. So the fact that nobody's asked for our business licenses up until now is kind of surprising to me. And I understand that it's a cost, but it's a cost of doing business, and what we're doing is a business. And if you're not making enough to make it worth being a business, then maybe you just need to switch over to the point that it is something you do either gratis or that it's not worth your time to do it anymore. And legally, you don't have to provide a 1099 to someone if they make less than $600 from you. That doesn't mean that that income isn't taxable. And that doesn't mean that you're not required to have a business license.
I'm over here. Right here.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. I'm going to add something to that 1099 regarding a question that gentleman up there had. If the church is receiving money the way that I understand it, but you're paying out money because the church has to show it as a write-off, that you paid somebody to perform that ceremony, then yes, the $600 a year is what affects somebody. As a business, I don't have to send you a 1099 if I pay you $599.99 a year. But as a business, it's smart for me to send it out because I'm still going to be submitting that to the federal government that I received funds that I don't want to have to pay business taxes on. And where did those funds go? So I think to that gentleman's question up there, anybody that you are paying during the course of the year to perform, you're going to want to send them a 1099. Now, if they choose to claim it or not is up to them. You can't force them. And then quickly on a note what you just said about having to have a business license, if somebody's an independent contractor, it's really up to them how they want to run their business. So whether they choose to have a business license or not, run legally or illegally, is up to them. Then to this gentleman's comment down here, a question in reference to if you're receiving a stipend for anything, waiters and waitresses have to claim their tips. So they're not being paid for a service, they're being paid from the restaurant. But they do legally still have to claim their tips. And in Nevada, it became a bigger deal because of the casinos. So, you know, no matter how you're receiving the money, you are still supposed to claim it. And my suggestion would be is hand all that to your accountant and make sure you have a good accountant.
Any other questions about business licensing or concerns? In the very back again, Paula. Oops. Ooh. Did you have?
In the past, when I've done the marriages for my granddaughters and my cousin in Illinois, I was told by your office, because I called, and they said, call the county clerk's office. Is that who you would suggest
Yes.
for all the states to call the county clerk's office to make sure that they have the reciprocity with Nevada, that they will recognize you?
There's not reciprocity on that level that I am aware of. I think what they were trying to say is the county clerks are the ones that issue marriage licenses across the country, and so they would be the one that would tell you what you have to do to be legal and to do a legal marriage in their area.
So if they
that's a
tell
good
you
idea.
nothing, then you don't have to do anything.
There's some states where you really don't have to do anything that I know of. But
Okay.
Nevada is, you know, I think because this is an industry, it's been an industry for 60 years more, you know, there's different laws.
Okay.
So I think we are probably one of the more strict ones. on some levels.
Thank you.
There are other states that, you know, have a waiting period still, that have blood tests still, that have, like I said, South Carolina, I know has 2 weeks of counseling. So there's, the state can do whatever they want. But then once you're married in that state, you're recognized as married around the world. So, yeah, you would need, the county clerk would be the best place to go to find out if you're going to some other location. And then other countries, if you wanted to marry someone, you would need to find out who is the one that issues the marriage license for those countries and ask them what their laws are, just to make sure that you're doing it right and protecting the couple, because that's what you want to do, is make sure the couple has a rock-solid marriage when you're done. Other questions or thoughts?
Earlier you said that if you want to do a marriage at Red Rock or say Valley of Fire or places like that, you have to ask for a permit. Where do you get those? Where do you apply to for those permits?
So you need to find out the jurisdiction of the location. I know that the city is also been cracking down on people that are marrying people in the public parks, the city parks, without pulling a permit. So whatever the jurisdiction of the place that you're at, you would want to contact them and say, what's the permitting process? And I'm doing a wedding for 50 people or a wedding for 2 people. Do I need a permit? And just find out. So, you know, Red Rock, you would call Red Rock. Valley of Fire, you'd call Valley of Fire. Okay. You know, if you're downtown, city, you would call the city.
Okay, thank you.
Red Rock is BLM. But yeah, I have heard that they've been sending letters out as well. So, yeah, yes.
Yeah, regarding the Catholic Church, what I know, I'm a new person to the state, a new person to the country.
Well, welcome.
For a Catholic Church, a marriage is more than a 6 months preparation, because it takes 6+ months to prepare a couple for marriage. And after officiating the marriage, whatever they give, it goes to the parish, and it is accounted, and from the parish only it's paid to the priest. So he is working as a employee in the church, and everything is go through that way. No undercut businesses are happening.
Yeah, I think for most people that work, there's not a whole lot of people here today that just work for their church. If you just work for your church and you are paid by your church, then the church is the business, even though it's a nonprofit business. So you're not going to be an independent contractor unless they say you're an independent contractor. So you would have to talk to the church specifically. But within the church has, again, different legal requirements than a business. So a chapel is different than a church, even though a church may conduct some weddings. But what the church does is they also do funerals and baptisms, and they have weekly or more than weekly congregations. They have sermons. They have a congregation. Oops. And so, all that means that it's different than a business that conducts marriages all day, every day. So if you're conducting marriages all day, every day, that's probably different than if you're doing all those other things that relate to being a minister or a preacher or, a rabbi. Other questions or comments? One more? Take advantage.
You have scheduled these meetings,
Correct.
these seminars, projected on a monthly basis.
Mm-hmm.
Should it be advisable for any and all of us to attend those month to month to month to month?
I don't think you really need to. I will try to tell you when something new is coming up. So this legislative session is ending. We're going to know some new laws. So next one that comes up, you might want to come because there's probably going to be quite a few changes that we'll talk about. Then, you guys might know more about business licensing that you can share. We don't necessarily have tons of new information, but it seemed like there was just so much stuff happening that it seemed better to have the meetings, schedule the meetings, then you're not last minute. If you feel like, that you don't really need to come, that's fine too. Make sure that you're talking to other people that do attend. But you're welcome to come to all of them if you want to, especially if there's something that you guys want to talk about that's happening that I don't know about. So it's not necessarily just me telling you stuff. I hope that these are opportunities for us to kind of engage in a dialogue so I can know what's happening on your side as well and how I can, better, improve the industry or work with you or whatever that is. So, I'm hoping that these are a little bit more conversations rather than just me having a bunch of new things to talk about, because I don't necessarily have new things to talk about all the time, even though lately it seems like it has been. And I think our software upgrade is finally getting all the bumps out. Please let me know if you're seeing anything on your side on the website or on processing or any of that kind of stuff. I think we have all the bugs out. It took a little longer than we'd hoped, but hopefully those things are kind of smoothing out at this point.
Yeah, my question is, since now the city's starting to crack down on officiants for the weddings that they perform within their jurisdiction, and I'm wondering if maybe other jurisdictions like North Las Vegas and Henderson might want to start doing the same if they find out that their area starts getting popular for officiants to go to, and they hadn't paid attention to that. I'm wondering if the idea of a multi-jurisdiction license has been thought of or has been proposed at some point. If word gets out that Las Vegas jurisdiction is coming down on the officiants and then Henderson wants in and North Las Vegas does too, then wouldn't it be better to have a multi-jurisdiction license and just be covered and be able to say I perform marriages all over Southern Nevada without the worry that, oh my goodness, I fell within this jurisdiction, I don't have the license?
Yeah, let Dolly talk to you, but we have proposed that. It sounds great, and it's not something that we couldn't pursue, but that would be a lot of work on you guys, not just me, but you guys would have to, work to get that to happen. It's not something that I think is going to be easy because from what I understand, if you do a multi-jurisdictional license, then of course you're giving a little bit to Boulder City and a little bit to North Las Vegas. So who processes it? How does it, so it's a excuse me, it's a bigger deal than it sounds like, but that doesn't mean that if that's what you guys want, that we couldn't try to set up the steps and hopefully over time get that done. I think
Len, you actually answered her question. That would be so impossible to happen. And that is why I started the question about, we already have, we were licensed by the state. We were investigated by the state. I remember when I got my license, this was like ages ago, months ago. I got it a lot sooner than some of the ministers that applied for it because I was already working for the county as a court counselor. And it will take about 6 months to be investigated, not just by the DA's office, but also by Attorney General's office to be licensed by the state.
No, I think you're talking about a chapel license.
No, not the chapel license, the officiants. As a minister, believe me, yes. When Loretta Bowman. That is really true. Is that, oh, hi, yes. I had somebody who graduated from Oral Roberts University, a bona fide minister. It took him 6 months to get the licensing. That's why I mentioned about the incidental use of your marriage license to perform. And Charlotte knows that. Charlotte and I, we started a long time ago. But anyway, it will be so impossible for that I think you answered the question earlier. If you want to make it a business, to be an officiant, you go get a license. Actually, you cleared it up already. In my mind, I'm already cleared who are to get license and who are not to get licenses. I think it's you explained it well. So,
thank you. Yeah,
thank
and I
you.
hadn't heard anything
It
about
helps
that.
being here.
Did you have Any other? Yeah, we have one more over here.
I guess just to get back to where my first question was, so up to now, commercial wedding chapels have not been required to have a business
Incorrect.
license.
No, commercial wedding chapels actually have to have a privileged license, so they have to have extra licensing. So they're like liquor and gaming, and they're in that group, so they have to actually have a privileged license, not just a business license.
So this is going to be in addition to that privileged license.
Well, no, because if you are an employee of a chapel, then you already
Just a
have
commercial
license.
wedding chapel to open up for business has to have a
Correct.
business
If you
license.
are opening up a chapel, you would need to apply for a business license, a privilege license, and go through those. They have actually extra rules and regulations for a chapel, correct?
But what is being proposed now is different from that.
No. A chapel, I think most chapel owners, all chapel owners within the city of Las Vegas have a privilege license. The ones on the Strip already have a privilege license because they're in casinos. So if you are opening up a chapel, you need to do the business licensing for a chapel. If you're an officiant, then you do a service, business services license. And if you're kind of coordinating like a wedding planner, then there's I forget the right name, but there's another different license that you would apply for that. You don't have to have all of them, but you have to pick the right one for you. But if you're a chapel, you need a privilege license, and so that's a lot more than an officiant would need. So yeah, don't start a chapel unless you follow the right rule, because that, I think, is a major problem if you are not getting the right licensing for that.
To address this woman's comment up here about a multi-jurisdictional, it won't happen. It's like if you do landscaping, when I was doing it, I had to have a separate license, whether it was Henderson, North Las Vegas, wherever it was, because they all want a piece of the pie. So, and there is no way for them to decide, should you give more to Henderson because you do more in Henderson, or should you give more to a different city? So each one is set up, which kind of sucks in a way, because when I went to do a job in a different city that I wasn't normally licensed in, if I wanted to do that job, I had to go to the city and pull a permit. So it's a good idea, but it'll be too hard to pull off. Sorry.
Which doesn't mean we can't try if we really want that, and it may be multiple years, but that doesn't mean you can't try if that's something that, as a group, we come together and approach people. But that would, that would be a lot of work, and it would take, I'm sure, a lot of time, and we still may fail, as we've been told twice, of people that probably have done it more than me. So.
Just to make sure that I'm clear, you said that the county is not requesting us to have a license at this time.
Correct.
And the city of Henderson only if we live in Henderson and work out of Henderson. Okay, thank you.
Correct.
My question goes to the lady that was talking about the investigation from the state for the minister license and that. Was that because you had a business, or is that just as an individual?
And Dolly, there are different things now. I'm not sure that those same laws apply. I haven't heard anything about officiants on the state level, so I don't know what you're talking about, which
I'm sorry.
doesn't mean I can't explore it.
Question? Thank you.
Repeat.
Kindly repeat your question or your statement. Sorry.
I was wondering, when you were talking about that you had to go and be investigated by the FBI and everything, was that because just to become a minister or to open up a chapel as a minister?
Oh, just to become a minister. Just to be
I don't
licensed as
think
a
that
minister. That's how
requirement is
difficult
still-
it was.
That was 20 years ago, so I don't
Remember
think the
those days,
requirement's
right?
still
In the 90s, but I did it 1979.
Yeah,
That's a lot.
and I'm not saying that I know everything, but I haven't heard anything about that.
Really?
Yeah,
That-
so it would have to be
Wow.
something,
Yes.
which doesn't mean I have heard everything yet, so.
Some of us Back, she's 79, mine was 84. Occasionally, the district attorney's office would get overboard in investigating. And it happened to me in 84 and a colleague of mine, or whoever was doing the investigating for it. And finally, they were told by the district attorney's office, knock it off, just check, make sure that they're operating as a church, and that's it. And so that stopped after 6 months.
Well, when you do apply for your Officiant's license, you pay the $25 to the clerk for processing fee, and then we ask, and it's required, we ask you to pay for a background check. So probably the background check wasn't available then. So now we just do the background check. If something comes back that's really off, then we could deny the Officiant's license. But probably the background check that you pay for, I think it's $45, is sufficient unless there's, really criminal endeavors, which I don't, that's really rare. But sometimes, obviously people that have been in the industry a long time, there have been people that have been way less than ethical. So, yeah, there we go. Yeah, I know this person. I know who you're talking about.
Lynn, just for clarification, the gentleman mentioned in his landscaping business, he had to pull a permit to do business outside of his home base. Okay. And you mentioned we needed to pull a permit for Red Rock, for Valley Fire.
Right.
Those jurisdictions. Is that different than conducting a wedding ceremony in North Las Vegas or Henderson? Do we pull a permit because of it's just that one-time
Well,
use?
I think,
or just to allow us to do
and
that?
again, this is not my forte, and maybe somebody can answer it better than me, but even if you have a business license and then you want to go do a wedding at Sunset Park, you might need to, most of the time if you go to a public park or a public facility, you might need to pull a permit. So even if you go to, Doolittle Center, you might need to do whatever they want you to do to comply with their rules.
I understand that. That's like a location thing.
Correct.
But the location in this particular instance, working through the church, the couple happens to be attendees of the church, but they live in North Las Vegas and want to be married at their house in Las Vegas.
You do not have to pull a permit to go to a house. And if they're a member of your congregation, you don't have to have a business license to marry them at their house.
Yeah.
We're talking about public facilities, so public parks.
But the public facility needs to check to see if
Correct,
there's
public parks, state parks, national
Thank you.
parks, public. Even if it's somebody's house that's not their own, and you wanted to do it in the backyard, that's a private residence. Or even probably the Elks Club, those kinds of things, because they're private. If they say it's okay and whatever, it's free, that's up to them. As long as it's private, that's different.
You'll be sending us a renewal page, asking us to renew it every 5 years, so we don't have to be concerned about it right now. That's something you're going to send out to us. Is that correct?
Yeah, and we're going to wait 5 years, and we can implement it when everybody agrees that that's, and that they would, not every single person necessarily, but that you guys are indicating that this is what you would like. So it's enabling, doesn't mean it's mandatory, so the clerk can decide. And from what I've understood from people in the last, this isn't the first time that you guys have heard about this, and we didn't, it wasn't in the legislation unless we thought that this was what you guys wanted. But this is a way for us to be able to get clean, accurate lists, which is, I think, important for you guys.
Oh, okay.
And not waste money. I mean, when we mail out 1,200 letters that return, it's at least $1 a person. Then we have to figure out if we mail it out again, try to find the person. So it's taking, 1 to 2 full staff people just to try to manage this efficient database. It's a waste of time. We'd rather do something to make it more efficient for you guys rather than spending time just like spinning our wheels trying to find people.
Surely.
And so this won't be for another 5 years at this point? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but do please make sure your information's up to date, and if you do move, please, let us know, and tell all your other friends that are officiants that please let us have up-to-date information. And again, we're going to be, as soon as the legislative session is over, we're going to be working with the Secretary of State to kind of update that site so it's more functional, but that probably would mean that we want to put emails and phone numbers on there so that people can find you. So let us know I think we have is that in there? I think what public email, what public phone number do you want to give out? You might want to get a separate phone number for your business or a separate email so that you don't get clutter, because those will be public records at that point, right? And people can look at it and they can use it for whatever they want, whether or not we like what they decide to do with it. So I would recommend getting something that's dedicated to the business. Any other questions?
One more. I'm sorry if I'm not totally
That's okay.
understanding this, but because most of it's through a church. If you're just an officiant working on your own as a business and you want to do a backyard private house in North Las Vegas, you still don't have to pull a permit for that? Or you do, because you're not going through a
Okay,
church?
business license is one thing. That means if you're doing business, you need a business license. But yes, permits are for public facilities. So like Sunset Park or, Fremont Street Experience, in front of the Bellagio, any of the state parks.
Okay.
Those, you would need to pull a permit. But any private facility you wouldn't need to pull a permit, but you would have to get permission, right? You're not going to go into somebody's house and marry somebody without permission.
Right, but so
yeah.
if you're up at, say, you're going to the Red Rock area, and say the Bonnie Springs restaurant says you can do it there inside, you don't need a permit for that. But if you stepped outside a few yards away onto a hiking trail, that's when you need the permits. Is that correct?
I am not BLM, so I would assume that is correct.
Okay. All right, thanks.
But if you're using the public facilities, you would probably want to check with that agency, because the last thing you want to do is have your weddings and your guests there, and then somebody from BLM, a ranger, coming up and saying, hey, you guys got to get out of here, you didn't pull your permit. I mean, that would be embarrassing.
Okay, and
I would just find out.
Okay, thanks. I have a really strange question. I saw a brochure the other day where they have weddings, and, like you can pick up your minister and go in a helicopter over the city and get married like that. Under that circumstance, what would the rules be on that for, jurisdiction, and would you need a permit for that?
Well, the helicopter's a private facility.
Okay.
Again, right? It's a private business, so they're doing it under their business.
Got it. Okay.
So
Thank you.
I'm assuming that they would be doing the ceremony on their land and ensuring that they're being married in Nevada. So that's why we don't recommend that you marry anybody on the flight to the Grand Canyon. On the Arizona side, not on the river. You park in Nevada on land so that they are rock solid that they were in Nevada when the ceremony is conducted.
Okay, great. Thanks. I'm understanding better now. Thank you.
Ship's captain, yeah.
I needed a boat, and I said to the captain, please be on the Nevada side.
And you were right.
He had-
You're right. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, I would recommend coming to the next meeting, because we will be talking about all the legislation and all the changes, like the 5-year renewal and some of those kinds of things, and I'd like your input. If you have questions, you can call me at any time. We also have set up out there a couple more focus groups. Those were really helpful so that we could talk in depth to a small number of people. So if you would like to be part of that, if we need another business licensing one, we're happy to have you come to that. But we're also, one of the things that we're doing in the legislation is giving the clerk's office the ability to ensure that officiants know what they're doing. Those of you that's gone through 3 to 5 years of training know what you're doing, but if you have just signed up on a website, you may not. So we're going to start creating an officiants training course, and who knows better than you what needs to be in there. So there's a sign-up sheet. We can have a couple more if we need them, or if there's more people. So we would really appreciate your insight and input, what you've seen over the past decades that you guys have been doing it, so that what we put together is the best possible program. So thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
like the county to